good evening or good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Layer 5 community meeting. Today is June 4th, and we have a tradition of inviting newcomers to introduce themselves on each call. So if you are new, uh, now might be a good time to introduce yourself to the community. So we have a lot of newcomers here. Uh, would anyone like to start us off?
So Ayush is with us. Ayush, PS. PS. It's a tradition for everyone to introduce when they join the call. So Ayush, nice to have you on. Do you want to say a couple of words? Just introduce yourself real quick, because we have Ayush Kandawal, who is old news at this point. But the other Ayush, it'd be really nice to hear from.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So I'm Ayush. I am a junior at Srimad Vaishnadevi University. I'm currently studying computer science, and I am really interested in design, actually. So I might switch. And I've been working on Meshri UI till now. Was it audible?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I hear what you're saying about UI, and in particular like UX being a really interesting, intriguing thing. So much about psychology. Yeah, so many tools of the trade too, and such like a something of is relatively an emerging trade. Human-centered design, user-centered design, things that some things that are hard to quantify. There's a lot of softness in there, a lot of gooey stuff as you get into more UX. So the world needs more empathetic engineers. By the way, does PS stand for PostScript? Is that the last name?
No, P stands for Pratap Singh. That's just a short form.
Nice.
So
nice to have you. Cool.
Usually,
no. Say it again. Usually, people have a hard time saying.
I was just asking about this dog. I don't actually have the link to this dog, and I see this in attendees column.
Totally. Good of you to ask. Meshmate Patel has you covered. So Ishita, yeah. Ishita, welcome. Ishita, have you gotten a chance to introduce before? Oh, Ishita Kishwani, I think you might have. But since I have to ask, that means that you have to do it again. Ishita, we will let there be like 30 seconds of awkward silence. Like it'll. So Ishita, if you can, say hi in chat, or it'd be nice to get to know you more. And then, Navindu, I suspect we have some other new folks on as well as Nitish, Karthik.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm Nitish Karthik, and I'm actually currently studying in my first year at IIT BHU, and I'm very much into front-end engineering, and I'm very proficient with I've been exploring many technologies till now, and I've been thinking for a long time about contributing to open source, and I haven't gotten a chance, but I think I've landed at the right community right now, so I'm very excited to be a part of this community, and let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Awesome, Nitish. Yeah, you are at the right community. Nice to have you here. Any other newcomers would like to introduce?
Lee is very much interested into front end.
Are there any others? If you are shy to get on the audio, you can just send a message on the chat. Yes, we have everybody covered, I guess. I'm not seeing any other new names. Okay, I think we can get started. So the first item on the agenda is from Michael. Michael, do you want to share your screen to talk about error codes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait. I'm sorry, Mike. I heard from Ishida, and just the quickest of Ishida. We will get that name changed in the doc just as soon as you say hi. Hi, Ishida. How are you? And where are you calling in from today?
Yeah, hi Lee. Thank you.
Hello. Hey, nice to meet you.
Yeah, same here.
What's your favorite color by chance?
My favorite color is blue.
Perfect. Good. You took the words out of my mouth. Very nice to meet you, Ishida. Thank you for noticing the name. Good to have you, and thanks for putting up with all of the sarcasm as well. So it's nice. It's nice
Yeah.
for you. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Apologies, Michael. I'm back to you.
No problem. My favorite color is also blue, so that's good. It's a good color. Yes, thank you. So just a quick demo of this new tool. It has been discussed a couple of times. Oh, now I have gallery view. That's really nice. And lots of people having their Abhishek for the first time. Hello. Good. You have to work on your beard a bit.
Yeah.
I win. Well, anyway, so this tool is actually a static analysis tool of the code to check that we're following the convention about errors that we have established, and to extract error information or in the details of errors from the code, from each repository, each component, and as a basis for publishing that error reference on the Measure website. I think it's easiest just to share the screen and show what the tool does. To find the right one. So do you see my screen with IntelliJ?
Yeah.
It's readable. Okay, so this tool is intended to be used on the command line locally to check the errors and to extract information and to do some sanity check and get some analysis summaries. But mainly, I guess it will be used in the CI/CD workflow to extract this error information and then to publish it or to upload it to a common place, or maybe to create a PR in the Measure repository so that the error reference can be updated. For the time being, it's just called error util, nothing special. It has it uses Cobra as command line utility, command line parameter and flag utility. There are a couple of available commands: analyze, doc, help, and update. The most important one maybe is doc, where there is more or less detailed description what the tool is doing and what the contract is between the tool and the code. Error names, I won't go through all of this. You can read that at leisure when you're using it or when you're just interested how the convention is built up. So this tool is relying on conventions, on naming conventions. So for instance, all error codes have to start with ERR and then a capital letter. They're recognized by this, and that they're constants or variables in the code. The tool uses AST to travel the code and finds the entities we're interested in using these conventions. and it makes it much better than just using regular expressions, for instance, and it's more reliable, but we're not doing yet using typing library. So it's still, for instance, when we're going through the code and finding method signatures, function signatures, then it's it's not based on typing, but just on looking at the signatures and see whether they have the right amount of parameters with the right amount of types as appear when you go through the code using the AST utility provided by Go. So this is must be read when you're using it to understand the contract and to use the errors correctly. Then another one is analyze. What this one does, and it has a couple of command line parameters. So you can, for instance, specify which is the starting directory. It's, if you don't specify anything, it's the current directory. You can add directories that need to be skipped. For instance, if we're running on in the measure repository, we would like to have an error reference in a separate file for measury, but also one for measury CTL. So when you run it on measury, you would exclude measury CTL. And there's a default list of directories that are skipped, like GitHub and the Git and the Git hub directory. And you can also have a verbose flag, then it prints out debug information as well. Running analyze, we just go through the code, do no changes at all, get detailed information, and then you get output files. Here you have an analysis that just lists the raw data that it finds. So it has entries. And then for all the error codes it finds in the code, it gives information, details, the old code when the code is going to be changed. So this is the same result that you see here when you actually update code. I'll speak about that in a minute. Then there is some information whether this code that is encountered in the code is actually a literal and not a call expression. I'll say something about that in a minute as well, and whether this code is an integer or not. It can be a, for instance, it can be not an integer, it can be a string. And then the convention is that the tool, when you update it, replaces this string with an integer. So that's one of the main purposes of this tool, to assign error codes to all these errors that are here. I'm going to demonstrate that in a bit. So everything that is found in this library is in here, the raw entries, if you like. And then get the summary. In this summary, you get information, what is the minimum code used, the max code used, and you see it's a big range here, but it doesn't mean that all the numbers are taken, because here there are big holes. So the first implementation was of handling error codes, or the design was that we have certain error code ranges assigned to, like adapters, different adapters and so on, and that's why the range is so big. But we have decided not to have error code ranges. But anyway, so this cool tool analyzes and makes sure that we do not have duplicate codes. It doesn't do anything with duplicate codes, but just reports it. So here, this code is duplicate code, so this has to be fixed manually, for instance, by changing the number or by adding a text instead of the integer, saying, you know, replace me or anything. There's no convention there. You can also see that one of these texts that should then be replaced by an integer is kit 1025, and they will also show up as duplicates, then meshkit test code, and so on. So this is are all duplicates that will be replaced when the tool is used to update the codes and replace the text with integers. You can also see that there is an entry for duplicate names. So the convention is that the error names need to be unique across this component, this specific component. So it's not allowed to have, for instance, this one declared twice in the code. So if that's the case, it would show up here. And so there are two uniqueness constraints, if you like. The name has to be the same across one component, which is usually a repository, has to be unique. And then also the integer, the error code itself, is also unique across for a component. Then what I said a minute ago is that the error codes, so these codes here, right, they need to be literals. So and they need to be integers in the end, but they need to be literal strings. So they can't be call expressions like this one. Let's see whether I can find it. This one, right? This is a call expression that is used in the code, and that's not allowed because then the utility won't work. So this has to be replaced. This is a manual process, so someone has to go in and actually do this and put in a literal string that is then replaced. Then here is just a list of the integer codes that are found, not sorted or anything. And then there is also that there are two methods for creating errors in Meshkit. One is called new default, and that is actually now deprecated. It is marked as deprecated in the code. So the static linter will issue an error if it finds it, but also this tool will actually list it here, but not do anything with it. So you can have just a quick look to see what I'm talking about. So broker nots error go. So we see that this new default is used in most places anyway, and this has to be replaced by the function called just new. And the reason is that actually new contains all the interesting details or as parameters that we want to expose on the error code reference on the Measure website. So the tool reports that as well. Let's go back to the summary. And then it also creates an error util errors export JSON file, which is the file that is then used in the error code reference on the Measure website to create this website. So you can see here right now in Meshkit component, there are just 3 errors that actually correspond to the convention, and that is then extracted. You see that this component is called Meshkit. It has a type called library, and the 3 errors that show up that are ready, and that actually were actually the error new with all the details about the errors are used, right? So these are show up here, and you can see here I replaced 2 of them, and one is error in mem, the other one is error viper, and then you can see that the information which is in the code where this is declared is extracted and can then be imported into the Measure error code reference on the website. And so this is one thing, and then the other thing that it does is actually update the codes, the error codes. So all these strings, replace me, test code, everything are replaced. One thing I need to mention is the tool expects a file called component info in the root, so where you started, with this format, the name of the component, the type of the component library, and the next error code. So the next error code in this case will be 11010, and then it just increments by 1 for all the error codes that need to be replaced. So let's see whether this works. Update. Then you can see Now this is interesting. So I just wanted to appearance, exit presentation mode. So you see what has been changed now. Layer 5. Can you still read it? If not, say no. You see here, if I look at the difference, what the tool now did, it replaced the string literals, which were a string and not an integer called test here, with the next codes in that list. So it just automates incrementally. Then it also implements component info.json. So the next error code is correct. Now, in Meshkit, there are big holes between these error codes. So there's also a possibility to actually say, okay, we want to start from scratch. And then it will replace not only the error codes that are just sort of like strings, like replace me, but also the integers. Let's check whether this works. I think it was minus force, right? And you see it's replaced to 1039. And if you look at the summary, we also see that now it's from 1000 to 1038. So the next one is 39. And you see that it's a nice sequence of error codes that is now generated without any holes. That was about what I had in mind to say. Are there any comments or questions?
Thank you, Michael. Like that was a really good demo. One question I had, like uh, while using this, do we define errors for one particular package, like within a component, or what is the convention that you are
So
specifying?
the convention, if I understand your question correctly, is the errors are for one component, so the namespace to the component. So which means if you want to, you can use the same error code, like 1050, in different components. You can also use the same error name, if it makes sense, in different components. But the convention is also that we're not reusing errors or error codes across components, meaning what I'm trying to say with this, we don't import, when we do import Meshkit in different other components, but we're not reusing in the other component an error code or an error from Meshkit. If
Okay.
that makes sense and answers
Yeah.
your question.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Other comments, other suggestions? So to give a bit of context, like if it wasn't clear before, uh, what we can use is we can use this CLI tool that Michael presented right now, and use it for other layer 5 projects, other Meshery components like Meshery CTL and Meshery server, so that we can have a consistent error code across all of these projects. And we also have a error code documentations that would be automatically generated with this file. So yeah, and it can be automatically be published on the layer 5 on the Meshery website, Meshery documentation website.
Which would I find it?
I guess there is a link in the
Docs.
comments. Okay.
Docs. Links in the comments. Here.
The reference, yeah.
Here you can see this is how it looks like. Who has been working on that? I can't remember his names.
Alonso.
Yeah.
Alonso.
So, yeah, Alonso. So this is the result of, there were no like error codes and no details defined. So that's why it's empty everywhere here. But they will show up here with all the information about the error codes. It can be used to for the users to troubleshoot and find out what is going on or what went wrong, if anything.
Yeah.
That's good this year.
Cool, good. Well, hey, there's a reason why we're so this is the Layer5 community call. We end up talking about all the projects. We talk about Meshry more than the other projects. It's the biggest project. There's a reason why we've dedicated as much time to Michael's effort here on the community call as we are. And there's a few reasons. And we would have dedicated the time irrespective of this next reason, but this is a really good reason, and that is that what Michael is showing here, it's not embedded in Meshry CT. He showed a command line utility, and it's not inside of Meshry CTL. It's like, well, it could be, but it's broader than that. It's higher level than that, and it's as a matter of fact, it's hence it sits at this mesh kit level. Like Michael in particular has been a steward of not repeating ourselves and of working smarter, not harder, and some other cliched statements, but and so I wouldn't propose that this go into Meshry CTL. Not that it wouldn't conceptually fit there necessarily, but it's broader than that anyway. I kind of just said that, but the reason that we're covering it in part on the community call is because this is intended to be used across all components of Meshry. So if you want to or have touched Meshry CTL, you need to understand, you have to go back and watch the recording of what Michael just showed. You need to understand what he just said. And there'll be examples and things. If you work on the operator or on MeshSync or on the broker, so Abhishek, then you have to, I guess, and hopefully Abhishek is wooing others to work with him in those components. But those are example components that will also directly benefit from this framework, this system. Meshry server, if you've worked with in there. Eventually, one of you, and maybe you're not on the call at the moment, call it out if you are, but one of you was just taking on a Meshry UI issue in which you were beginning to expose some documentation in a help icon. So if you were going to run a performance test, there's 3 different types of load generators to pick from. Well, what's the difference? And so the contributor was putting in a help icon to explain what the difference is to the user. It's like, well, that's sort of like inline help. That's like inline documentation. And well, it's no stretch of the imagination that the JSON that Michael was just showing, one, that's like he was showing where that directly maps right into the documentation. So for those of you who don't like documentation, you can thank Michael again and again, because this is an auto documenting thing. Literally, there's an open call. There's a couple of calls for help here, a few things for all of you to digest. So I'm looking across all the names here. And it's like almost all of you this will touch, because you're either contributing in Golang to any of the Meshry components or Meshry CTL. And the nice thing is that 2 months from now, when this is just commonplace, a month from now, hopefully, when this is just commonplace and just common use, a lot of the contributors may not even really, you'll just copy and paste what other people, you'll just go meshkit.new error, and you'll fill in the stuff, and you won't really think about the fact that all the rest of the publishing and the conventions and the assignment of error codes and all this is kind of being taken care of for us. But the users will, well, and eventually you will be very thankful again, because users will have error codes specific to your error, whatever you made up right there. And it'll be unique, it'll be referenceable. But we need a couple of volunteers to see the effort through. So one is Michael does in general a fantastic job of writing stuff down, and he wrote down a lot of things about the behavior of this utility. And he just explained not all of them, but most of them. And he spared us some of the rest of them, because it's a lot for anyone to digest. I mean, he's written them all down here. We really need to take this and upgrade our contributor docs. And the contributor docs have recently been upgraded on docs.meshray.io. They're being broken down by individual component. This definitely needs to go there, and some examples. So between some of the other maintainers here, Navendu, Aditi, Abhishek, of the areas that you're focused on, I called out 3 names of individuals that would be great to like pick this up and begin to demonstrate examples of its use. So there's a need for someone to document from a developer's perspective, how this is used and what it's done. And Michael is here to review and help ensure that that's correct. Another open need is that utility, it is such a prime, or we can integrate that into the GitHub workflows. There are any number of GitHub workflows that run anytime you open a PR, anytime you commit to an existing PR, anytime you merge a PR, anytime we do a release, anytime you star a thing, there's lots of free compute running around for free, not doing any Bitcoin mining, but running around for free here across our projects. And one of those should be the invocation of this utility. I'm impressed that it puts out 3 different JSON files, one of which, like we were saying, it directly goes into docs. The other of which we should highlight, and I try to highlight it just in some note taking here, that I think it's the errors export JSON. No, I'm sorry, it's the analyze summary JSON that we either will need a little bit of human review, or just in the GitHub workflow that invokes this, it should probably look to see if the JSON objects duplicate codes and duplicate names, if there's any entries in there. And if so, those are not auto remediated from what I understood. And so, we'll need to go back and basically you either repeated yourself as a contributor, or you use the same name that someone else did within that particular component. The cool thing about, I know that this takes a little while for everyone to digest, but the cool thing about what Michael had done in a few ways is that he'd worked to make sure that all the error codes are unique. And there's some auto incrementing going on, and there's some persistence that happens for that component after a run. So after it runs, like Michael was saying, the last standing error code that was used is then tracked and kept track of. Each individual component, he showed the component underscore info.json. So the last of the 3 bullets, that for every component, Meshray component that's here, it uses Meshkit to some certain extent today. Not Meshray server in particular uses it maybe the least. And that's an outstanding work item for all of us, to have Meshray server use Meshkit more and more and more, specifically around the instructions that are going on here. And so every component needs to fill in their component name into that JSON file. Michael, they need to fill in their component name and the
type, name and type, and the sort of the next error code. And we have not yet an authoritative list of types, right? So adapter is an obvious type, but client is another one, maybe library. So we have to sort of define that somewhere as well. Or maybe maybe just you just going through the repositories and set this component info JSON file everywhere, and then that's it.
Oh yeah, kind of do it once. Yeah, that makes sense. I'll admit to taking liberty in advance of all of this being automated and making up one. Actually, I think Michael just said it. So there was some Meshray CTL errors that people just kept running into. And I think I was going to shoot myself if I had to tell people how to troubleshoot it for the 9,000th time. And it's not because it's because of it's not because of the people. It's because It's because it's a natural pitfall that people fall into, and that means that the more that people run into a given error, the more that we should consider how to help them avoid that in the first place. But so to Michael's point, Michael, I use the word client, or the type of client. So maybe that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. Good. So there's more to do, more to do with the errors util. Michael, the errors util, it currently resides as a capability of MeshKit, and that's where nice. Before we move on, you know what? Before we move on, if you don't have questions, that's because you're still digesting it like I am. Like, you have questions. What we need really next is I'm going to stick my elbow into Abhishek's side and probably Navendu's side. And if other people want elbows in their side too, then just say, volunteer. But for these two individuals, I'm going to look for some examples that they will help promote and propagate the use of error utils. So between some of our more popular components, Mesh Reserver and Mesh CTL. And then we'll start to get these into the adapters as well. By the way, this is for those that work on UI, you'll inevitably have this sweet moment where you're looking over someone's shoulder, you're walking by their desk, you're seeing them share a tweet or something, and they're looking at your UI. They're like looking at your docs that you wrote, or they're looking at the UI that you designed, and it's such a sweet, such a satisfying thing to see. And now I lost my train of thought of what my point was going to be. Something about like if you ever see, and I saw it a week ago, was someone was in Slack and they're like, yeah, I'm getting, and these are kind of circling around some of Piyush's contributions, by the way. They're like, yeah, hey, I'm getting this thing. And it wasn't just that they're like saying, I'm getting this thing, what do I do? They're like, hey, I'm getting this thing, and I see that this is what I'm supposed to do. They were saying they had already Googled it. It had already, actually, I don't even think that they had to Google it. Do you know why? Because in Mesh CTL, when they got this error, it said to them, it gave them this URL, # Mesh CTL client. Or whatever the # like, and it brought them right to this thinking error, which is awesome. But hence what I was trying to say earlier about Meshry UI. When you're in the UI, and if you let your brain think about this for a little while, there's a lot of power in like inline documentation, specifically around errors that people might face. Let me go do something that may or may not work. I don't know, maybe this will work. Let me do it 4 times and see if it breaks or something. But when people experience an error, what's really, dang it, I can't even break this software at this point. It's getting too good. At some point, like, this is what I was trying to say, is like how awesome, how sweet it is to see the fact that like it no longer becomes gobbledygook that gets spit back in people's faces. I'm like, I have no idea what this is. Obviously, this was written by engineers who thought that other engineers were going to use it, but not regular humans, because nobody can read this. But if it had an error code, like, yeah. So this area, we're going to be talking about this area more and more. Really cool. Anyway, we have so much more to talk about in this meeting. I'm super pumped about how dramatic of an impact that foundational capability will be to a lot of what goes on. So it'll be a different user experience than a lot of people have seen from other utilities in the cloud native ecosystems. Be good.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great. And let's move on to the next agenda. So, Utkarsh, do you want to talk about your upcoming sessions to help contributors?
Yeah. It's basically a short announcement, I guess. So we'd be by we I basically mean I'd be very soon hosting some sessions for contributors, and these would be ideally there would be ideally two sessions. One would be dedicated to basically letting contributors know that how they can add pattern support to other adapters also. So right now we have support in Istio adapter, but not in other adapters. So that supports need to be propagated to other adapters, and that's something that one of the sessions would be dedicated to. The second session would be dedicated to it would be basically incorporating dynamic UI components, dynamic React components into the Meshri UI. And this is actually also coming from the patterns thing. Pattern have the patterns register some of this stuff. This is something that we'll be probably talking about in the sessions, that how exactly we can do the things that are in pattern files in the UI also, while rendering a very dynamic and very flexible components. So these are the two sessions. We would basically discuss the basic architecture, and then how the contributors can directly start contributing onto it. I think, yeah, that's it. I'll be actually I'll probably share share more details about the sessions on Mishri channel.
Awesome. Thank you, Utkarsh. So if you are interested in working on that, like look out for Utkarsh's messages in the Slack channel. Moving on, we have a new discuss.layer5.io website. If you haven't been familiarized with this, this will be our public community facing or a public facing discussion forum. So uh, it's still pretty empty. Like there aren't many topics of discussion going around in here. So what I'd like to do is like it would be helpful for others and for people in the community if we start discussions in here other than the Slack channel, because the Slack channel we only have up to like 1 month uh, 1 month storage for messages, so we end up repeating most of the stuff. And uh, that goes for like contributors and maintainers. Like there are a lot of repeated questions, and this can save us a lot of time and effort. So if you have a question, you can create a new topic on the appropriate channel, I guess it's called. So this will help. So we can in the future like reference these two others, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. So if you haven't already, like you can create an account, and there is a invitation link here which you can use to join this community. So yes, anybody else have any mesh mates have anything else to add to this?
I think it's really good. And we only have 2 weeks in Slack.
Oh, 2 weeks. That's
I have
really
about
bad.
2 weeks in Slack. So, going back, where I wrote something about this in Slack is no way. So this is really good. Excellent. Really good.
Yeah, and the more and the more active we are in Slack, it starts to get to 13 days, 12 days.
Now it's 10,000 messages, so that's not a lot. I think 10,000.
Okay, all the more reasons to use the discourse forum. So I have shared the link in the chat. You can join it right away. Okay, moving on to the next item. So we are approaching we O.6 release, and there is a public roadmap for Meshery and Meshery CTL. It's on the Meshery GitHub repo. So what we have here, what we have been working on, like it will be released in a couple of weeks. So we have updated the performance profiles in Meshery server, and we also have support for Meshery patterns. And coming back to Meshery CTL, we have been working on Kubernetes support, and we also have support for Meshery patterns, and we have refactored the Meshery perf command, and we are working on supporting multiple Kubernetes platforms. So yeah, that's the roadmap, and we are in need of a release manager. Lee, do you want to talk about the responsibilities of a release manager?
I do. Actually, I want to point people to a doc. I can't. I only had 30 seconds before the call, and I couldn't immediately find the doc. So I'll find the link to the doc rather than talking everyone's head off about what it would mean to wear the release manager hat. It's in short, herding of cats is sort of the byline of that. If you're interested, come see me, and also I'll paste the link. Okay. And are you going through the rest of their names next to some of these items? We can reserve some of this, maybe just given the time for the Meshery call, potentially, but the names that are next to each of the items, some of you have some extenuating circumstances surrounding your commitments here, which is entirely understandable. Some of you have stretched to pull in a couple of items that were otherwise slated for V070. That's awesome. And some of the rest of us just are still crunching away on V060 items. And so for the names that are associated here, it'd be really nice if this next Wednesday, if we could try to articulate, capture how far along we think, how far along each of you think that those respective areas are. Not that you're entirely, not that you're the only one working on those areas by far, rather just being the representative of the area, the feature lead, so to speak. We're over halfway there for sure. Over halfway, that's a comfortable thing to say for sure.
Yeah, I guess we are almost there. Like most of the stuff has been tried and tested, and yeah, awesome. We will be talking about that on the next week's Meshery development call on Wednesdays. Okay. Moving on, like we are planning to conduct a webinar, on-demand webinar with associated with CNCF. So the current proposal is to conduct it on 24th June. So it will be an on-demand webinar, so you can watch it later on the CNCF website or on their YouTube channel. And it will be about Meshery and how it can be used to manage service meshes. So look out for that. Okay, back to you, Lee. Do you want to talk about UI contributions and Figma contribution?
Yeah. So on Nivendu's last note, there are more opportunities available to us collectively about things like the CNCF webinar than we have people to give them. And so there's a content calendar, a spreadsheet that's in the Google Drive that generally tracks where we are intentionally being social and where we're intentionally marketing the projects. So if you're into any of these things, say something. And there's different venues and forums. We often give talks at conferences. We do webinars like this. We can do panels. We can do blog posts on various venues. So there's a lot. But we're not doing a whole lot of it. you can see that there's any number of newcomers to the community, and all newcomers are welcome of any shape and size and form. Most of them are of the shape and size of form of contributors. Beautiful. What's not happening nearly as much, though, is users. And I don't know if you're like me, but I like to get feedback on work that I do. It's even if it's, you know, harsh feedback, like that's better than none at all. Point is, we're a little starved for users. So getting some of the word out, that's the goal, is to get some cranky, some patient, but maybe cranky users, you know, people who want to go along on the journey of discovering bugs with us, but putting some things to use, giving some feedback. So anyway, if you're interested in this stuff, you know, please say something. And on the next topic, I figured we had a number of people who are here who are saying things like Josh had said the first time that he joined, and he got pounced on right away. And that was something like, I'm into front end. I do visual things. I do JavaScript things. And now Josh is a meshmate, and now Josh was the almost singularly, not entirely, but almost singularly the guy behind discuss.layer5.io. So really, really cool. But there's a number of us who are here, and there's all kinds of things to design. In Meshry UI in particular, it needs an overhaul. It's not terrible. To improve upon it means that we need to give it relatively deep thought. We need to be relatively conscientious and thoughtful about the user flows and what people are trying to accomplish, and how consistent we can make the interactions, how we can set a paradigm and reuse that same paradigm, how we can, you know, I won't, anyway, as multiple contributors come in, well, and the tool that you know, we're using, for better or worse, generally it's probably for better. It's lacking a few things like every tool, but it is Figma. And it's like writing code, unstructured in some sense, that you can do designs in a bunch of different ways. And so we figured it would be helpful to establish just a handful of conventions about how it is that multiple fingers can be in the same pie and not collide. So we don't need to, so if you would, just as this is the main page, sort of as everyone here should have access to Figma, and some of you it's in view mode, some of you it's in edit mode. Generally, edit mode is unreserved. Rather, if you want edit mode, you should probably get edit mode. You should adhere to these conventions where you're not bumping into other people, where you're, anyway, here's an initial set of conventions intended for us to be able to have many people, many fingers in the pie, and still have something that tastes good when we're done. So the next item on the agenda was, so we mentioned a little bit earlier, if you go to that link, we've had in Google Docs and in markdown files in the repositories, the contributor.md, the proverbial, well, the literal and the proverbial, how to contribute to the projects. And you know, each of the components require some common contribution conventions, but each of them also are deep enough that they're their own areas, they're their own components. And so so we've been expanding and publishing out of those Google Docs here. And some of that is around convention. So something like, you know, something like Meshry CTL it's a user experience that people interact with on the command line. And so some amount of consistency and conventions are good to articulate. So in the same vein that we were calling out contribution, you know, how to use Figma and how to do it in a way in which is complementary, the same kind of things are going on here. This is the exact place where it would be really nice to see, well, we're missing a Meshry server page, and I don't know if it would go on that page or maybe it would be its own page, but there's one about the air utility that we just saw and actually Meshkit kind of more broadly that needs to be written. So these are just kind of public service announcements tossed onto the end of the agenda. Do we have, there's one other on the agenda, and this is certainly community oriented. So I didn't put a hyperlink because, you know, just tossed it on real quick. We use a number, you know, so when people join the community, most of you have filled in the same form, and the form will ask you things like, what are you into? What are you passionate about? What are you here to do? And some of that, one of the check boxes is like here to be a community manager. And there's like, at one point there was like 30 of you that are sitting in a community manager channel. And there's like 20 of you now that are fairly actively helping steward the community, helping make sure that everyone has a good time. And so we use a couple of tools to help with the automating of community management. And one of the ones we were just exploring around with is, well, it's a startup, young tool. It's called Orbit. And I think that their site is orbit.love. And it's about community management. They've automated a few things that we already automated. So we were just exploring the tool, and I figured I'd call it out. There's a few more seats in the tool for people to come and take. Now that I'm saying this out loud, that would be other community managers could have those. One of the things that have been suggested recently is that there's really only there's essentially like one private channel in our Slack workspace. And that one's for community management. It's private because there's the occasional personally identifiable piece of information that goes across there. And that's most notably just occasionally people's emails are seen on there when someone signs up. They sign up with an email, and the notifications that are sent into that channel by various bots might say like, oh, hexdump@gmail.com signed up today. And, you know, we don't want to, so it's sent to a private channel. That's why the channel is private. That's where the community managers hang out, and we'll talk all about all the rest of you in the best of ways, trying to make sure that people are having a good experience. People are unblocked. So if you, I guess my point is, if you want to, so I just want to be transparent. Hey, we're trying out Orbit. There's nothing to really be transparent about. It's just sort of generally sharing. We use tools, and community management here is a thing. Hopefully it feels like it's a thing. And Orbit itself, it's kind of like a segment, if you're familiar with that. It helps you intertwine, connect to your Slack, connect to your Twitter, connect to your GitHub, and then help show you activities that are going on across them. It'll connect to your discourse. So the discuss.layer5.io, that's an instance of discourse. So it'll connect to those four things, and maybe we'll have to share some reports about activities and some data from Orbit if we continue to use it. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Thank you, Lee. I guess we are done with the agenda and we are almost on time. That is something new. And yeah, thanks everybody. It was a productive meeting, I guess. And yeah, we will see you next week. Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
Bye.
David.
Thanks. Same to you.
Bye, Michael.
Bye.
Work on that beard, Abhishek.
I think Lee said. But you took away the meeting room.